Welcome, everyone, to DZone's virtual roundtable on data observability. I'm Jesse Davis, and I'll be your moderator today. Observability has moved from a monitoring checklist item into a product capability that shapes reliability, speed, and customer trust. Our DZone's 2025 Observability Trend Report set out to capture that shift, where teams truly sit on the maturity curve, which practices separate proactive programs from basic monitoring, and how choices about standards, architecture, and automation show up in day-to-day outcomes. We also aimed to make the guidance very practical for you. Specifically, we looked at where observability delivers value across the entire software development lifecycle, from planning and designing all the way through deployment and maintenance. We also looked at how open standards, especially open telemetry, reduce lock-in, improve signal quality, where AI is working today with correlation, anomaly detection, and guarded auto actions, and the guardrails teams use around those things. We looked at which metrics best predict user pain and how security and compliance requirements shape the roadmap. We're going to unpack a lot of what this report revealed today, but more importantly, we'll get some firsthand insight from our expert panel. Let's start with some introductions. First up, Damien, Principal Software Engineer at Elastic. Hey, Damien, welcome.
Hi.
And Shabi, VP of Product Marketing at Honeycomb. Welcome, Shabi.
Hey, Jesse. Thank you for
All right,
having
we're
me.
glad to have you guys with us here. We're going to start by grounding our conversation in some data, okay? According to our survey, about half of teams, 54-ish%, remain in the first two maturity levels, monitoring and observability. But we did see a notable shift towards proactive compared to last year, so good year-over-year improvement. In a sentence or two, right? Take some time. Where is your organization on the maturity curve today, and what moved you there most in the last 12 months? And Damien, let's start with you.
Thank you. I think we're trying to be as proactive as possible because we see, and I think the industry in its entirety shows that observability actually allows going way further than just maturity levels and development life cycles. Especially because it can allow teams to engineer the products so they decrease that number of deployment stages. With observability as well as tools such as feature flags or canary deployments, we can actually test most changes directly in production with actual traffic and actual data rather than mocked things, with things that actually represent the reality and with no visible impact on customers because they do not see the new thing. So I think we are trying and we are pushing our customers towards being more proactive observability. But I think there's even one step after that, which is reducing the number of development stages that reduces complexity for infrastructures.
Very cool. Awesome. Shabi, what do y'all see over at Honeycomb?
Yeah, very similar to what Damien is talking about. But I find the other way, which is that, we are all also have software engineers who are also building software and putting it out. And what we see within our own engineering team, that there were a lot of AI skeptics, right? There were a lot of obviously machine learning has been part of looking at observability data, but still the models were constantly being improved. But in the last, I would say 6 to 7 months, we have seen a very drastic shift where with AI-powered IDEs, with MCP, being able to pull observability data in where the place where you work, being able to ask questions, that's kind of where proactive observability is really starting to shine. And I would argue that that I completely agree with Matthew on the number of stages is shrinking. Trunk-based development, being able to test in prod, all are concepts that are what engineering teams that are aspiring for excellence kind of go for. But at the same time, we're seeing observability in the early design and planning stages as well, right? Where we're seeing people asking questions of like, hey, what is happening with my production app? What are the the user experiences that are having users that are having problems, and trying to go more granular into understanding the system behavior, which is
Mm,
going to unlock, for example, insights for a product manager who's writing the PRD for the next
mm,
set of features, or
yeah.
having that engineer who's just started on a new team being able to get up and running very, very quickly because they can
Mm,
just ask questions about what code base that they're going to be owning from now on. So I think
mm.
there's a
It's
fundamental
awesome.
shift in kind of short circuiting all of that we're seeing with proactive observability.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one of the biggest signals that we saw in this year's trend report is how observability is kind of spreading across that whole life cycle, kind of what you were just talking about, right? It's not just limited to we're going to dig into this when something breaks, right? We've kind of moved beyond that. We're instrumenting earlier, looking at all the different signals across environments, feeding insights back into the planning and design process. So, as we talked about how maturity seems to rise with that expansion of coverage, there's a couple of things. First, most teams in our report, about 63% now do observability work across 3 or more stages of the life cycle, which is cool. And maturity rises as it expands earlier in the life cycle. What kind of concrete behaviors separate observability from this proactive observability, like in practice? Like how do we differentiate those behaviors for those watching? And Damien, we can start again with you.
Yeah, but we differentiate that behavior by, in my opinion, thinking of observability quite like security today, not security like
Mm,
as we did before as an afterthought. Yes, we need to think of observability very early in the development lifecycle, because setting it up at later stages will make it painful to handle, and is usually why folks rely on like automation tools like no code
mm,
observability, which are great, but they also provide less meaningful data. The reason
yeah.
is they provide only the data that can be automatically detected, which is going to
Mm,
be standard things. But
mm,
as soon as you need to add like domain model things, then it's way harder if you only have no code observability. And if your application is architected so that the only way you have observability is that way, then like adding your own stuff in there to really know what's happening, and not just like how fast your server is responding, but really which customer is impacted, or which exact specific things that only your company is doing is
mhm,
being impacted. You are going to need to think of observability as something very early in the development lifecycle. I think it's something that is slowly starting to catch on.
mm.
That engineering teams are starting to think of observability as something they need to do right away in the like at the architecture board. But it's maybe slower than it should be.
Okay, cool. And should be same question. And then kind of where do we think we get the most change outcomes in the whole SDLC? So not only how do we differentiate, but where do we get the best bang for our buck?
Yeah. Yeah, like in the report, I find it interesting, right? Like how there's almost like an equal split between monitoring observability, proactive observability,
Yeah.
uh, and you can kind of see a pretty distinction that like people are split on where they are in the maturity cycle. So it
Yeah.
depends on the culture of the organization, right? I still talk to companies where things like Cursor and Claude are still like not open for all engineers to use. And then you have the
Hmm.
flip side where people are so advanced that they have processes in place. So I think there's a bit of that just cultural change that needs to happen and propagate through. But I think what is clearly separating the teams that are doing proactive observability and just observability at large is coming down to one, obviously, what vendors are they using for observability, and how far enough have those vendors have basically invested in those capabilities
Mm,
in making that proactive observability. And the second has to go with the business side of like where the pain is, right? I
mm,
know later down in the set of questions in the report, we'll talk about like what are the different success metrics for
mhm,
engineering organization, like mean time to resolve or number of incidents. And it has to go back to that can proactive observability actually
Mm,
move the needle on those? And in
yeah.
some cases, we are finding, like, for example, in cases where, on our side, our founder, CEO Charity talks about unknown and unknowns, like things you
Mm,
did not know that could cause you issues. How do you identify
yeah.
them? And being able to use AI to kind of find and discover those things where maybe you as a human could not run those 100 queries in a
Yeah.
minute to get that answer. And I think having that cultural practice and being able to use AI in a smart way, both vendor assisted and using your own models, is what's going to be separating you from proactive observability, doing proactive observability versus standard observability.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. And, you've both kind of alluded to it, like the observability begins as early in the process as possible, right? And to get the most out of it, which I think is great. Now, a lot of mid-size organizations on the proactive side were over the index compared to the smaller ones. Like, what do you think that is? Do you think it's resourcing, culture? Do you think it's the choices of their tech stack? Like, why do you think that the mid-sized or even larger orgs um, are more proactive than smaller peers? I mean, I can see both sides, right?
Yeah, from my side, I actually found that very interesting. I would
Yeah,
have thought like the startups of the world who are picking the new
yeah,
tech stacks would be the ones, but I could also see why, the startup, you kind of heads down, you're very focused on like delivering value because you're still maybe trying to find the product market fit, trying to
mhm,
get your product out. So you're basically making very careful choices about what you're doing and where you're investing your time. And then the larger companies have also kind of understood that there's a lot of checks and balances. I mean, you look at like a healthcare startup with like PI data, they're going to be wary about how much of AI, which is vendor assisted, or others, where we are sending that data and having them, learn from it.
mhm,
So there are a lot of like checks and balances and compliance and data privacy rules that start to come into play, where you may not see proactive observability as uh, uh, enforced or being able to like
mhm.
gain traction. But I guess the middle is the right place to be, where you can take the risks, but also be able to implement it in the workflows that like, okay, we do this right now with like 20 steps, or we have a pain, it's identified. Let's
Mhm.
experiment and see if we can solve that problem, and have the resources who can actually have the time and space to be able to do that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tools there, and Damien, we wanna get to you too. Do you agree? Like, I could see both sides, I mean, on that split.
Oh, I mean, I definitely agree with what Chevy said. Yeah, I mean, for small organizations, enabling observability is definitely expensive, and they probably don't have a return on investment that it can provide yet. Also, like having deep observability also allows having like deep availability as well, which may not be the first thing that you want to do when you're just getting started.
Mhm.
And for large organizations, the cost of change is also huge, and
Yeah,
that takes time, which is why probably also mid-sized organizations are the first ones to change their habits because they have the budget, the need, and still the agility.
very cool. Oh, so the next thing, like, the data shows cloud native and hybrid architectures now make up about 2/3 of all environments, right? Like more proactive teams, more likely running hybrid. And that shift reflects a push for flexibility, is what we're seeing, but also a lot of challenges around signal quality, cost, and control. And should be like, why do you think teams are landing on hybrid? And when do you think that helps versus hurts signal quality and cost?
Yeah, I mean, as a business decision, obviously having multiple options and
Yeah.
not uh, being vendor locked, multi-cloud, to being able to have a combination of on-prem for your secure
Hmm.
workloads versus going with vendors that are in the public cloud. I mean, these are all like come down to like business decisions and where the
Yeah.
industry, where what type of company you are. But I think in general, um, what we are finding is that there are kind of few truisms to where observability is today. The cost of observability has skyrocketed, right? You're starting to see instances where it was hard to believe that the infra cost for what you're paying would be cheaper than the observability cost about a decade ago. And that's not the case. It's almost like a flip, right?
Yeah.
And companies are also, cognizant of like how much, vendor specific they want to be. And they want to get out of that vendor lock-in because it's not about right now. Observability is here to stay. Technical complexity is going to keep on rising. It's not like a 2-year, 3-year thing. It's the next 5 years, 10 years thing. And they want that flexibility of going down to open standards. So I think the hybrid is to me just a smart business investment of making sure that you are bringing in best in class for your secure workloads, and obviously also using the best in class vendors for very specific things that you're looking to do, because it's not going to be one tool that's going to be able to solve your problem.
No, you're right. I agree. And then Damien, for you, like when we think of like standard users, OpenTelemetry by far leads adoption, right? Followed next by Prometheus and Jaeger. What do you think? What is the smartest incremental path into OpenTelemetry without breaking something that already works? Like, how do people get there?
With very small steps.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, and at Elastic, we've been in observability and like monitoring and observability for quite a while. And so obviously a lot of our customers have a lot of baggage when it comes to switching to OpenTelemetry.
Yeah.
And even us, it took us a fair amount of time to understand that, yes, OpenTelemetry is here and we do need to invest in it. But it's like, I think every vendor has been working on getting a smooth path for people. And even OpenTelemetry itself, like before OpenTelemetry, there were OpenTracing and OpenCensus. And every OpenTelemetry SDK is supposed to have a bridge that allows migrating smoothly from either of them to OpenTelemetry. And I think most vendors have the same for their own agents. So I think that's the smoothest way to migrate, like set up a bridge so that the old agent still works and OpenTelemetry is here. And then you can start adding new observability into OpenTelemetry, but you can also start migrating your old one into OpenTelemetry as well in small pull requests that you ship to production kind of risk-free.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, Shabi, you were shaking your head a lot, so.
Yeah, no, I agree a lot with what Damien was kind of hinting towards, like as vendors, like how has the shift, and having worked at Datadog and now on Honeycomb, I think one clear difference that I've also seen is the investment in open standards really needs to be part of your culture, right? And at Honeycomb, I think we are fortunate to be spending a lot of time in contributing to OTel. Being able to propagate like why is it important, and strengthen its capabilities by investing a lot by having a dedicated team that continues to of contribute, all of that. But you're right. I mean, the cultural shift of both the cultural and the technical shift of going over to OTel sometimes is a challenge. That team, I think. From where we were a couple of years ago to now, I think to Damien's point, there has been now migration utilities. Vendors are offering their own migration utilities to be able to do it. And I think AI as well. I mean, we acquired a company, Grit, earlier this year that did auto instrumentation. So using AI with known patterns of how you can take a code base and inject, OTel telemetry and get it going, that is starting to be something that I think we'll see more of, where instrumentation and those things, which are true and tried and tested playbooks, you can kind of start to see how AI can help you fast track. And I would imagine the proof would be in the pudding that that the migration over to hotel would only increase with some of those AI-driven utilities being offered in the next couple of years.
Mm, I bet that's a good call. All right, now when we continue to look at the report, there's a clear majority, right? 3 out of every 4 teams. This is huge, right? So 75% plus are using or considering open standards, right? Should teams layer Prometheus or Jaeger alongside a vendor suite, which I think Damien's what you were kind of looking at before this bridge thing, right? But I'm really getting at vendor versus non-vendor, right? Or should they stay vendor opinionated for simplicity, right? It's a double-edged sword, and we just touched on it a little bit. Whereas one, like it's like Apple back in the day, right? There was a huge benefit in being all Apple until something doesn't work, right? So kind of give us a little flavor of your thoughts there. And Damien, we can start with you.
Um, yeah, obviously, it's a clear no. People should not stay vendor opinionated. But it's sometimes a bit more complicated than that, and sometimes it doesn't work either. And
Mm,
the nice thing and the way which is very great about how OpenTelemetry is architected is that those standards allow doing both. Because you can keep things vendor agnostic for the entire lifecycle of
mm,
like how you emit telemetry within your app into the OpenTelemetry collector that sits within a cluster, and possibly within a collector that covers like globally covers all the data across many regions.
mhm,
And only at the last stage of telemetry decide how the data will be made available afterwards, whether
okay.
that's an open tool, a vendor one, or both. And because it's a single point of decision at the end like that, then changing tools becomes rather easier. And the pain point would be like people using the tools. But I think it's a great thing because it actually makes work harder for vendors, because now we have to be the best at displaying data and making it searchable rather than just like using customer locking. But in the long run, it also means that that's where it's great, because that just makes the products better.
Mm, okay. Awesome. Shabi, what do you think?
I think we're kind of back to using the best of breed tools for the right use, and I think also what uh, what skill set you have in the house, right?
Mm,
I think it is equally important. Like, some of the observability tooling is kind of like akin to, like, how Salesforce is the tool of trade for AEs. I mean, if you don't know
yeah.
how to use Salesforce, you're not going to be considered a good AE. And I think we're getting to a point with both vendor opinionated and open source tooling where there is specialized skill set that you need,
Mm,
because it's not enough to just be a vendor opinionated. You maybe need something out of the box to be able to layer. And there are other places where you may also need like a tiered cost strategy, right? Like for your
mm,
critical applications that are, mission critical, you need to up and running. You may have one set of strategy, which would be a combination of maybe vendor opinionated, open source. And then because cost is going to be an issue, you probably want to capture all data points, make sure that all your logs, traces, and metrics are there because you want to react to. But then there are other applications where you are okay with an SLA of 48 hours of an issue going on, and you don't
mhm,
need enough. So I think we're going to that point where observability and the standards and the vendor opinionated suites that are there have matured enough that you can start to have a tiered cost strategy and have a stack that is appropriate for the architecture that you have and the type of applications you are building for that are customer facing versus things that would be back end or in house.
very cool. Well, I know we want to get to the AI section, but you brought up cost. So I'm going to get into that for just a second. Um, when we're thinking about tooling, we've talked about how the cost is flipped for infrastructure somewhat. And as these programs around observability continue to mature, strategy around your platform becomes less about cost and more about fit. We've talked a little bit about that. Um, the higher you up on or you are on the maturity scale, you seem to favor, or the results of our survey seem to show us that they favor managed or public cloud delivery, and hybrid is more in the casual, proactive stages. At the same time, standardized telemetry and higher SDLC integration kind of reduce duplication and sprawling dashboards, right? So when you're choosing a platform, right, what criteria trumps price? Like when you're thinking about a platform to choose, what are the things you're willing to splurge on, right? Um, and and then the second question, we'll go ahead and ask them together, like what trumps price, and how do you keep your teams from drowning in a sea of dashboards, right? And Damien, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's actually always about price and costs, because you're either paying for a service or you're paying for staff.
Mm,
And for small teams, when you don't have like that much observability data, it may make sense to have your own infrastructure because the potential small downtime that you have will beat
mm,
the added cost of using a platform. But as the team grows, they have like bigger and bigger needs, which usually translates into the need for more and more staff to handle internal infrastructure. And that's when refocusing on your actual core is important, and using a platform may make more sense.
okay.
So yeah, I think it's actually always about cost, just where you put it. Um, and about dashboards, I think, in my opinion, there is only one way to avoid running in dashboards. It's with really carefully thought SLOs and the
Mm,
ability to correlate data between observability signals. And by that, I mean that basically service availability should be tracked by just a few metrics
mhm,
that really represent what the metric is doing and how it's available or not. And so that's the SLOs for that service, and the only thing that alerts should be set up for. Then with good data correlation, such as like exemplars to link metrics to
mhm,
traces, then engineers can navigate between the macro view of an alert metrics and the
mm,
micro view of a specific request being traced, and switch from one to the other, which changes kind of how you navigate observability outside of dashboards and into more like a way of asking questions and just navigating the data. And I think navigating observability data fluently and smoothly is about answering questions, not looking at dashboards. And so
mm,
a good tool will allow an engineer to easily get the answers to the questions they're asking, so they can investigate the root cause of an incident or just ask the question where they need to be answered. Looking just like at a pile of dashboards is not really something that human beings are made for.
mm. All right, Shabi, get in there.
Well, it's hard to argue against Damien. Human beings are not built for dashboards.
No.
That's a mic drop right there. And it's true, right? I mean, clicks and being in the UI are things, even me as a
Yeah,
developer in my early career, I wanted to be in my IDE. I wanted to be in my terminal and
yeah,
be able to have as much context that is delivered to me, or have my own gut and instincts and intuition, because I've worked on this code space for such a long time.
yeah.
And I think what we're seeing in that proactive observability space, and I think we'll see more of this, is that how, having AI can help engineers, developers, SREs, help them with reducing the context switching, right? Like, which is that I need to have this answer for this question that I'm looking at, and then I'm going to keep on digging because it's not a clear cut. Like, I'm looking at a
Yeah,
problem, it may not be a problem. I need to investigate. I need to go back and share my analysis with others in my team, get their thoughts, because these are now complex problems. These are not the cut and dry of like, hey, this one
yeah,
alert on my error budget is going up and I need to kind of do it. So I think that's kind of the things that you're seeing over time, and I think it's also kind of the user behavior habits of like, we're so used to with the instant gratification of like digging deeper with ChatGPT, and just generally like the next generation is not gonna
yeah.
stare at a dashboard,
No,
and they're gonna
no.
try to like look for answers with the type of new behaviors that are that they're adopting now in their own practical lives. I think going back to the point of again, like picking between uh, cloud architecture observability, where
Mm,
hybrid, on-prem, cloud native. I think what we're seeing is that it's going back again to uh, kind of the one, you need the high cardinality, granularity of data. And
mhm.
some of these vendor assisted tools have made it cost prohibitive for you to send all your data to them, because then your cost is just too
It's
high. But
astronomical, yeah.
but in those particular use cases where you need all that, I
Mm,
think the shift to hybrid, shift to on-prem is starting to we are seeing that trend, because some of these larger companies, for example, have very pennies on the dollar negotiated rates for infrastructure that they
yeah.
have with the hyperscalers, with their own private clouds. And they are, I think, going to force, or at least enable that trend of like, what is that on-prem observability stack that is going to be now the next wave? And so that's
Mm,
one. And I think the other part is also, which is that, again, observability data is also data that you own as your proprietary data, which
mm,
tells you about your system, about it. There's actual intelligence that's in there.
yeah.
And now you layer up AI. Do you really want to go and have that AI sit next to a multi-tenant software offering where it's learning from others, or you want that trained on your data, right?
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's also going to, maybe, have that trend of, especially in larger organizations where that data becomes proprietary, that they want that to be on-prem, or they want just subsequent workflows that are hybrid. Again, going back to that tier cost strategy of which applications are more important to us and which applications are the ones that we are gonna, spend, still on
Yeah.
observability, but not as much as we did
Yeah.
before.
Very cool. All good points. And you lead into the next subject so well. Everybody is talking about AI. We've talked about AI. We've talked around AI. But of course, right, it's a tangible part of the observability toolkit nowadays, right? We don't want to do it without it. About 82% of teams are using it in some form, one way or another, right? Most often for some of the things we talked about, log analysis, anomaly detection, nobody's going to sift through all that data or build a static dashboard on it. They want to interact. Um, and the incidence response automation is growing in larger organizations. Adoption's climbing fast, but the questions of like trust, guardrails, measurable impact, those are still kind of out there. So, Damien, right, we'll start with you a little bit, but where is AI actually saving incidents today, right? Is it around correlation, anomaly detection, automated actions, or somewhere else?
I think it's I would say anomaly detection. But I think it's also been there for a little while with
Mm,
machine learning, which is how anomaly detection really got into the industry of observability. And I would say it's, in my opinion, it's anomaly detection most likely because when you have a large number of services running in production, every service has very different needs. And if like one service has like very high CPU at a moment, it may mean something extremely different from another service having very high CPU. And so it means you cannot just like curate alerts or graphs that will work for everything. And that's where anomaly detection is very helpful, because then
mhm,
you don't have to treat every service like as a snowflake.
mm,
You can treat them kind of all together, and you will know if one is misbehaving, not because you said more than 98% of CPU usage is misbehavement, but because anomaly detection detected it. And it's going to detect at 98% for one service, but not care about that for another.
mm. Very cool. All right, Shabi, what do you think?
No, I think Damien hit it on the nail. Anomaly detection is one of those first use cases that's ripe for
Right.
again, AI works really well with pattern matching. If you have baselines of how certain systems have behaved, and you see anomalies, being able to have AI and ML both kind of come into to kind of help, you know, uh, I would say like one of the advantages of AI on anomaly detection is to kind of reduce the noise, right? Like if
Mm,
you've had like an alert based culture where you've had those, alerts set on certain type of triggers, AI can really come and help with making sure that, hey, are you looking at the right thing?
mm,
Versus like having that on-call person be inundated by multiple issues, but okay, what is truly something that is going to react? And I think with the
right.
learnings that you can train with the AI with the models, or have even vendor assisted models being able to offer out
Mm,
of the box of like, hey, what are the some heuristics that are just common across
hmm
type of deployments? I think it's going to be helpful. But I think also I get a bit antsy about the automated actions piece, which I think, you see like things like AI SREs and stuff like that starting to be like
hmm
almost like offering. And I think humans in the loop is still going to be a very much of a
Yeah.
requirement. You cannot have AI just run away, right? With
Yeah.
being able to do it. So I think the combination of human plus AI, and ultimately humans making the decision of like what is important and where to do it, I think that
Mm,
is what's going to be really, really valuable. While these out of the box services and things like, with logs, with anomaly
hmm
detection, doing baseline, they make sense. But I think at the end of the day, it's about developing that workflow that is going to be helpful in reacting to the incidents in a much better way, where you truly identify, is it a problem, how quickly we're going to react and catch it early, and then also moving the needle on those success metrics, right, on mean time to resolve or number of incidents going down.
hmm
So I
Yeah.
think you have to kind of take the ROI of AI to those workflows by only having humans in the loop. You can't just like trust AI blindly to be able to like take
No.
those and you're just like forgive and forget, like, type of mentality.
Yeah, AI is definitely wrong sometimes. Uh, and like seriously, you
I
ask
mean,
it to do something.
not that humans are wrong, not wrong. It's
Facts.
just that the
It's true.
accountability of AI being wrong is going to lead to a lot of finger pointing, because you're not
Yep.
going to be like, oh, AI was wrong, but it's going to end up being some team's responsibility. And I think keeping humans in the loop is still a very much of a requirement uh, before
Yeah.
you hand off completely automated stuff to AI.
Yeah. I think you're right. And Damien, to that end, like to remediate against runaway automation, like what are some guardrails that you would recommend putting into place to stop that? I mean, we got humans, but how? Right? How do you make sure that what you build has things where we can prevent
I
that
mean,
runaway?
um, I think so. I definitely agree with what Chabi said, that AI is definitely going to be wrong, not just sometimes, in my opinion. But I also think, humans can also be wrong, more than
Facts.
sometimes as well. And I mean, I've been in incidents where we had to run an SQL query and someone forgot the where in delete query, and like that's purely human error, and that was before AI, so that can happen as well. So
Mhm.
guardrails are important whether we use AI or not, and especially during an incident where it can be stressful, where maybe it's Sunday morning at 6 a.m. And so it's important to have those guardrails. I think actually AI can be one of those, as long
Mhm.
as it's not necessarily the one making the decision, but it can be the one making suggestions. And so, provided it's
Mm,
actually human beings making the decision and thinking and not just reacting to what the AI is saying.
mm.
But I think another guardrail is just over human beings, and just not whenever something is running production, especially during incidents, not
Yeah.
being the only one to look at it, not the only human. You can possibly ask as well AI for a safe checking. I would definitely not let AI run anything on production on itself. But yeah, asking for AI for a counter check, but also asking another human being for a counter check, I think is extremely important, especially during incidents. We
Very
are
cool.
each other's guardrails.
Yeah, we have to build those guardrails, right? Should be anything to add on AI stuff? I know we're running out of time, and I want to talk a little bit about performance. But wanted to. Is there anything else y'all want to add into
Yeah, I would
AI
say
land?
like the other thing is that AI obviously thrives on speed of access to data and
Mm,
context, which comes with data quality, right? So having the strong data hygiene, having the right mix of data available for it to be able to be right
mm,
most of the time, is going to be important. So going back to like, are you getting enough context of data around your log metric traces to be able
mm.
to have AI be a helpful tool? Because it can run those queries, 100 times faster or 1,000 times faster than a human,
Absolutely.
and being able to give you that analysis. And I think in that context of getting to 0 to 1, like something happened, and giving you a perspective that is that from that you don't have anything to something that you can
Mm,
react to, is something that AI can be really good at and giving you a leg up. Ultimately, as Damien mentioned, it's still humans in the loop that are going to make decisions, but that 0 to 1 is fantastic with AI, especially
oh
if you
yeah.
have good data hygiene.
Yeah, and maybe even 0 to 2. um, but as we're moving on, I'm gonna try to wrap us up here. But I can't let us skip performance, right? I mean, gone are the days we're just tracking CPUs, error rate, memory consumption, server response times. That's kind of what we used to do. But it's not about just the metrics we track. It's about interacts. What metrics interact mostly with the users and affects their experience in a positive or a negative way. So this year's data showed a notable uptick in log and infrastructure monitoring, kind of hinting at a shift in how teams surface and prioritize and find and fix performance issues. So just really one question here, like how do you see teams finding performance problems and bottlenecks? Right? How are they finding those things? And what changes are y'all seeing around that? And Damien, you can go first.
I think it's actually a bit tricky at the moment, based just on observability data that you would have in production. Like definitely like logs and traces. I mean, I'm putting them together because technically traces are just like logs with a lot of conventions.
Mm,
But like logs, traces, and metrics are not meant to find performance issues. Yes,
mm,
you will know you have a latency issue. Yes, with tracing, you will be pointed that, for example, it's in your SQL query. But if it's because you have a memory leak, then you will not know. Um, but the nice thing is there is actually a fourth pillar of observability coming.
mm,
It's currently in development in OpenTelemetry, and that's profiling. And
mm.
we start being able to do
Okay.
more and more profiling in production. I mean, profiling used to be just in development environments
Yep.
with like development data, which is like it requires building actual like tests to be able to get measurable things. By being able to run it in production, we get way more data, measurable data, and therefore way more insights. And so things that before seemed like a black box now really look like you can know what's happening within them. And
Mm,
I think that's it's a bit early to say this is how teams are currently finding performance problems,
mm.
but I think it's really how they are going to be fixing them in the near future.
Okay. All right. Shabi, agree, disagree?
So, I think maybe slight disagreement about whether how big a profiling is going to be, and is it the fifth observability pillar? But it definitely has its advantages, and it's another set of tool, right, for
Mm,
engineers to be able to diagnose issues, which is awesome,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it
But
is.
I think the perspective I would offer is that in terms of like user pain and experience, what we're starting to find out, especially with AI infused workflows, is that it's just not like, as Damien mentioned, like log metric traces don't tell the true story, right?
Mm.
It's still associated with the experience of how you were interacting with that AI. What was that judgment call that the user made about the output that
Yeah.
came out of that workflow? And I think capturing those signals are starting to be now an art and science of how
Mm.
the developers are now starting to connect with the actual pain that the users are seeing. And there's a number of ways, obviously, customer satisfaction scores and others that are starting to now bleed
Mm.
into thinking
Mm.
about the success of a feature, the success of the workflows that you're building. So I think that's one aspect that I think some of these like metrics, like even the DORA metrics or
Yeah.
engineering driven metrics, they are absolutely important. MTTR, frequency of deploys. But then it's also like, hey, what's the how's the business being impacted by you shipping features, and what is that user pain that you may be hidden. And I think that's kind of where I think going back to uh, like vendor assisted patterns on anomaly detection,
Mm.
being able to have AI, natural language, being able to do investigations, and being able
Mhm.
to have that time and space that now that you have had a mean time to resolution, you've had frequency of deploys increase, and maybe you're feeling good about where you are as an engineering team. But now you got to start thinking about what are the next architecture patterns and things that we have to improve on, and trying to find those unknown unknowns and being able to identify the pains that you may be hidden may come
Yeah.
down to more granularity. So examples that we are starting to see is that I don't care in the aggregate what thousands of my users are doing. I care
Mhm.
specifically about these 5 customers or these accounts because those are my $1 million plus accounts. I cannot afford to have them be at pain, and being
Yeah.
able to go down the granularity of what is the experience that you're tracking for these particular set of customers is starting
Mhm.
to become really, really important. And that's kind of where obviously data hygiene, having the most context, all of that becomes important and plays into your observability stack strategy going forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, great insights around that for both of y'all. And listen, AI and performance, two huge things in the world of observability. I want to thank you both. We had a great time today, learned a lot, shared a lot. That was awesome. Had a lot of fun. But a few themes stood out for those of you who were watching. Observability is shifting to be earlier in the cycle. To have a bigger impact on the whole development process. Hybrid architectures are becoming more standard. AI is definitely starting to deliver some real value when paired with human judgment and some oversight and some guardrails. Um, we heard metrics matter when they're directly tied to the customer user experience and security, compliance, all that stuff. We didn't have time to get to it, but that's the more boring things that nobody wants to talk about anyway, which is great. But the full DZone 2025 Observability Trend Report digs deeper into these findings with data and practitioner perspectives to help you benchmark and plan your next steps. You can download it at dzone.com today. So I wanted to thank you both. Damien Chabi, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you to the audience for joining us, and a special thanks to our sponsors, Honeycomb and Elastic. Until next time, keep observing.